Hey guys, welcome to MyJourney Wednesdays. This week we have a little bit of a different format. We reached out to Richard Ham at Rahdo Runs Through, and he actually responded to us with a video. So I'm very excited to present you with our video interview with Richard. As always, check out our website for other MyJourney Wednesday posts. We've talked to some great people, and go there to get any updates on our game, Duties Domination, as it's approaching its launch date. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy our interview with Rahdo Runs Through.
Hey everybody, or not everybody, hey Fedja? I'm not sure how to say your name, Fed. Life in Malta is great. Jen and I absolutely love how it has a ridiculously low cost of living and yet an incredibly high quality of life. I mean, crime is almost non-existent. It has one of the lowest crime rates in the world. The people are friendly. Everybody speaks English. It's good weather. It's good sunny weather almost the whole year round. What do we do outside of board games? I'll be honest, not too terribly much. I mean, it's actually a shame. Both Jen and I are certified scuba divers, and yet we have never dove here, even though there's some very good wreck diving and whatnot. We live right across. I'm looking right out my front window, and there's a very, very popular bay. People come from all around the world to dive here, and we haven't. Pretty much about the only thing we do for fun, other than play board games, is watch TV and movies and walk the dogs. Jen reads a lot. I read the internet a lot, but a good deal of my life outside of playing games is spent really kind of supporting Rahdo Runs Through and keeping up, answering people's questions, researching upcoming games. It's kind of really the sole focus of my life. You have variously mentioned being homeschooled, growing up on a boat, working on video games, etc. What has been the most interesting experience in your life so far? Where would you rate Rahdo Runs Through among your top experiences? That's a tough one. The thing about doing Rahdo Runs Through that's absolutely fantastic is it's the first time in my life I've worked for myself. My whole life, I've always worked for other people. And while I've had opportunities to, do startups and, ally with my coworkers, and we could go off and start our own video game development house and stuff like that, I've never done it. I've always worked for other people. And I've never really had the bug to be my own boss. It's never really been a drive. But now that I'm doing it, I don't know how for 20, 30 some years I worked for other people and did what they said. I don't think I could go back to that now. It would be so difficult. So Rahdo Runs Through is hugely impactful for that reason. Although on the flip side, man, doing Rahdo Runs Through has brought more negativity into my life than anything else I have ever experienced in my 47 years on this planet. Don't get me wrong, I am a minor celebrity in a very, very tiny niche industry that the vast majority of the world doesn't know about, but still, within my little fame of my sphere of celebrity, man, it just draws so much negativity into my life. I'm actually kind of foolish because I set out a goal for myself to always answer anybody's question whenever anybody asks me anything anywhere that I see, provided I see it. Whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or Board Game Geek or Reddit, if they ask me a question, I will answer because it's weird. I always tend to treat online interactions with people the same way I would real life interactions. If I just don't want to talk to them anymore, I have to say, okay, goodbye, I'm not going to talk to you. Because I wouldn't just, in the middle of a conversation with you in real life, just say, ooh, and just walk away and not say anything. And so, like I said, I've set this goal for myself to always respond to people, but man, that has just brought so much sour grapes and just nasty, nasty stuff, and it makes it very, very difficult. I've got a fairly thick skin. Some of the stuff that's been thrown at me, you just gotta have to just let it roll off you. So personal attacks, But the fact that I'm always talking to people and always trying to be involved and engaged just means that I constantly find myself surrounded by negativity. I'd love to say that Rahdo Runs Through is like the top, life experience I've ever had because again, there's so much positive about it. I get so, I mean, the amount of negativity is dwarfed by the amount of positive vibes I get from people. And it's absolutely wonderful, and I appreciate it, and I know I'm helping people, I'm making their lives better. I mean, that's always something that was so important to me when I was making video games, too. Even at the darkest days, when I haven't left the office for 4 days straight, and I'm sleeping on the floor every night, and, and I know things are just going terribly, and morale's at an all-time low, I always took solace in the fact that I know when this game comes out, if we're lucky, there will be millions of people whose lives are touched by it and made better, even just for a few hours. And the same thing is true for Rahdo Runs Through, and I know that. But, yeah, just being around all this negativity all the time just kind of sours that. I have had a lot of other really weird life experiences. Like I said, probably the biggest one is I grew up on the boat and I was homeschooled by my parents. Although that's actually not true. We used a correspondence course system. This was back in the late 70s and early 80s. I cannot remember. I remember the school was out of Maryland, and they would send lesson plans and textbooks. So it was like we were getting a full standard grade school education, but we were just doing it at home, just me and my brother being taught by my mom. The thing is, I was pretty much teaching myself because my mom's focus had to be completely taken up by my brother, who has always been the wild child, the problem child. Me and my brother, we're a very interesting nature versus nurture kind of case study when it boils right down to it, because our lives have gone so differently, even though we had the same basic building blocks in terms of what our childhood was like. And it was a weird childhood. So that was really interesting that I was pretty much homeschooled and pretty much taught myself everything until I got to high school. And then high school was so weird because I developed no social skills. So for the first part of high school, I was just the quiet, introverted, shy kid. And that's kind of still who I am to this day. To survive in the social, arena of high school, I eventually had to kind of develop this persona. This Rahdo Runs Through persona I developed in high school as a defense mechanism because everybody knew me and everybody liked me and everybody wanted me to tell them jokes and stuff like that and entertain them. And I still do that to this day, but it's not really who I am. So that was kind of an odd thing. Of all the places I've lived in life, I think I probably Seattle, I still love the most. And of all the jobs I've ever had in my life, it may seem weird, but I think probably the best job I ever had was I did this for 3 or 4 years in my early 20s. I was a mailman. I started out as a part-time job while I was in college at the University of Washington. And then, during off semesters, it was a full-time job, and I really loved it. I loved the physical. It was the only physical job I've ever had in my life. Everything I've ever done is cerebral. But just getting out there and walking the very hilly streets of Seattle, delivering mail day after day in all types of weather, but just constantly moving. You could kind of get into a zen place, and I absolutely loved it. I still think I probably enjoyed that job more than any other job. One of the reasons I liked the job so much is because I was a temp. I could have a really flexible schedule, and often I was able to get out of the sorting and let other people do that while I just did the delivery. I loved that. That was probably the most fun I've ever had working for somebody else. I've lived all around the world. I lived in Malta, I lived in England, I lived all over the United States. But I really did love Seattle, and that time in my mid-20s, probably, I'm assuming when I'm 150, because our lifespan is increasing all the time, and I'm looking back over the length of my life, if I had to guess, I'd say probably my mid-20s is still kind of the high point where I was just in perfect sync. But I still got a long ways to go, so I'll have probably other high points as well. Let's see, you mentioned you're a heavy reader once upon a time. What genre did you most enjoy? What are some of your favorite books? Actually, it's funny. That was the time when I was a heavy reader. Maybe that's what I'm missing in life right now, that I don't read as much as I used to. I was a heavy reader growing up on a boat, and therefore not having any kind of social life. When I wasn't teaching myself and I wasn't watching TV, I was reading books. This was when I was 11, 12, 13. The only books I had available to me, because we were out in the middle of nowhere, out in the California Delta, there were no libraries. I was just reading my parents' books. So I was reading, John Steinbeck and Joseph Heller and Ken Kesey. Those are the books my parents had. Those were the early influencers for me that really kind of shaped a lot of my worldview. And I was reading those, like I said, 10, 11, 12 years old. Those are probably my 3 favorite authors to this day, because that was such a huge, influential time in my life. I can't think of his name now. I haven't read anything for a long time. World According to Garth, Prayer for Owen Meany. Oh, why can't I think of your name? Now I got to look it up. John Irving. I'm going to say my favorite author of all time is John Irving. And also, comic books. Obviously Frank Miller and Alan Moore, but also Garth Ennis is amazing. The stuff he's done. What have I been reading recently? Saga. What's his name? Vaughn, author of Saga. I really love him too. All right, what is your first name? Vaughn. Brian K. Vaughan. I really enjoy his stuff as well. Some of my favorite books. Well, they're going to be the ones that really affected me the most. Catch-22. I have probably read Catch-22 more than any other book, period. I must have read Catch-22 a dozen times when I was a kid, and several times as an adult as well to revisit it. Like I said, it shaped my worldview like nothing else. Number 4. What is the most bizarre request you have gotten in the last few years of running your channel and the most interesting? Nothing really. I don't get a lot of bar requests. I mean, the requests I get, 99% of the requests I get are, would you please do a run through for my game, for our game? And I get that over and over and over again. 9 times out of 10, I say no, because I've decided I'm not going to do, getting back to that early question, I don't like overt negativity. I don't want to create negativity. I want to put positive stuff out in the world. So if it's a game that I think is really crappy, I'm just like, thanks, but no thanks. So I say no to most games. But yeah, there are no really kind of bizarre, crazy requests. I definitely love, there's been a couple of times this has happened where organizers of conventions have said, we'd really love for you to come to our convention and we will pay the airfare for you to get there and we'll put you up in a hotel. And I will jump at that. I absolutely love that. I got to do it for BGG-Con. Yeah, is that right? Yeah, BGG-Con and LieraCon. And if any convention owner out there wants to offer the same thing, and heck, you don't even have to worry about the hotel, just the airfare. Because I'm sure wherever I go, there will be somebody whose couch I can crash on. Because, my wife and I, we live in, it's one of the reasons we live in Malta, because the cost of living is so low here. We live cheap, but I love that. I love traveling. When I was a video game developer, lead designer, creative director type, I was jet setting all around the world all the time, traveling back and forth to Europe and Asia and America, and I absolutely loved it. And to this day, I've still got so much frequent flyer miles that Jen, she travels now back to the States every year, and it's almost entirely free because she's just been slowly burning through all the bajillion frequent flyer miles I built up over the years. So I love doing it until I have to pay for it. If I'm having to pay for this airfare, suddenly I mind how uncomfortable I am, and I am not willing to put up with it. So that's an interesting thing. If there's ever a convention that wants me to come out, and I'll do full coverage of it, and do a run through of it, and talk to the organizers of it, and show all the strengths of it, and express my experiences. I've done several of them now, and I really enjoy doing it. Oh yeah, no, there's a third one I did in Belgium. Oh, what was it? There's the AeroCon, BGG-Con, and the Belgian one. It had a pirate theme. Oh, it's just driving me nuts. Now I got to look that up. Zomerspel! How can I not remember Zomerspel? Zomerspel. They put on a great convention every year. I strongly recommend it. So, question number 5. You've had a strong career holding many key positions at prestigious companies, from the hectic lifestyle to relative quiet and early retirement in Malta. How was the adjustment? How does the experience of reviewing board games compare to working in video games? Well, that gets back to what I was talking about earlier. More than anything else, the important thing is I'm working for myself. I have no responsibility. Actually, that's not true. I have a lot of responsibilities. But they're responsibilities I put on myself. The fact that I actually run a crowdsourcing campaign to actually fund this, because while I'd love to say I'm retired, I'm not really. Rahdo Runs Through is a full-time job. I easily spend 40 or more hours every week either filming run-throughs, supporting run-throughs, doing research for run-throughs, or preparing for run-throughs. I read probably on average, I think I figured it out once, over 500 rule books a year. And I only run through about 200 games. So those other 300 rule books I'm reading are all for ones that are, okay, I'm just reading this to confirm whether I want to cover this or not, and then I end up saying no. That's a lot of work. Reading rule books is not fun. I don't think anybody out there enjoys it. I certainly don't. So it's definitely a full-time job. And actually I do have responsibilities because I feel obligated to provide enough content for the people who actually were willing to give me money. They didn't have to, but the fact that they did, I really do feel obligated, and that puts a lot of pressure under me. I decided early on doing this Rahdo Runs Through thing that I'm going to be a quantity, not quality guy. For some people that is unacceptable, I understand. I hope you enjoy the many other channels out there that do the same thing that I do, but they will only put out one video once a week or once a month. But hey, it'll be really smooth and polished. Me, I'm going to put out 3 to 5 videos a week. They won't be smooth and polished, but there will be a lot of them. And at the end of the day, I care less about making sure every little thing is perfect and more about just my core mission of Rahdo Runs Through is just demonstrate what the game feels like to play. I think it's more important. I focus less while I'm filming on trying to ensure that I make sure everything is played perfectly. I focus more on trying to do interesting things. I don't make strategic moves when I do run-throughs. I make moves that let me demonstrate more of the core game. When people say, oh, that was a stupid move, why do you do that? What a freaking idiot. The amount of times I get that, and it's like, I did that move so I could show you how that system worked, so you could get a better understanding. I'm not trying to make a strategy guide here, nor am I trying to make an instructional video to teach you how to play the game. I'm just trying to help you decide whether you should put 40 or 50 or 60 quid on the table to buy the thing. That's my only goal. Sorry, I'm way off topic. What was the question? The differences between video game industry. So I was talking about, in the old days, I had responsibility to the publishers, who gave the company I worked, because I always worked for independent developers. The publishers would give us millions of dollars to make this game. And then my boss, his entire company was riding on me making the right decisions to make sure the game was successful. That was a huge amount of pressure. I was talking about how I have a lot of pressure under me with Rahdo Runs Through, but nothing compared to literally millions of dollars worth of money, of budget spent on the decisions I make. People's jobs on the line for whether or not the game is successful, based on, in large part, whether I anticipate and make the right choices about whether the game should go towards A and B. That was so epically stressful. I can't even understand how I did that for 20 years and how I put myself through that. I'm way too... oh man, that was so hard. So, yeah, everything now is a cakewalk. I've made a lot of really successful video games that have, stood the test of time and are kind of, Siphon Filter is considered a modern classic, Fable 2, Sims for console. But I've made a lot of games that people didn't particularly care about, even if I still love them. Brink, Pitfall: The Lost Expedition, and I'm incredibly proud of those games, but, they got a lot of shade thrown their way. But now, when I'm exposed to negativity because of Rahdo Runs Through, I'm like, I don't have to be exposed to this. I could just walk away, and more I'm finding myself walking away. But let's move on to number 6. You mentioned in your Reddit AMA that you see the acceptance of board games as being mainstream. Will still take a couple of generations. Where do you see board games falling short in comparison to video games and gaining a wider acceptance? Also, any thoughts on where the industry is heading in the next few years? I don't know that it's falling short. I don't think that's fair. Video games did not crack through into true pop culture awareness until the early 80s. Until Pac-Man, really. But they had been around since the late 60s. So it took like 20 years before we had Donkey Kong and Pac-Man and all of that. And before that, video games were just this weird little niche thing that kids did. They played Pong, or those kinds of things. Pac-Man came out, and the Atari 2600 came out, and overnight it became this truly global phenomenon where everybody had experience. Everybody played Pac-Man of a certain generation. It wasn't something that was just reserved. Every restaurant in America had one of those table versions of Pac-Man you could play on. It changed the world. There were top 10 Billboard charting songs about video games. Obviously, that hasn't happened for board games. Our biggest game to date, putting aside Monopoly, because I don't really consider that. I consider that a precursor. The same way Space War was a precursor. That really had, no real meaning in terms of impact. Monopoly is like this whole other thing. Catan is like our first really big. This is this is not an accident of chance. It's just kind of like building on the shoulders of other things. Catan is something new and important and fresh and game-changing. And when did Catan get published? Let me look it up. BoardGameGeek.com, Catan. Catan was published in 1995. So we're about 20 years ago. It's a little bit more than 20 years. And I would say, I'm sorry. Oh, no. So it's been 20 years since Catan. But Catan, yeah, okay, if we're going to draw parallels then, Catan is Pong. Pong caught a lot of people's attention. A lot of people went down to Sears and Roebuck and bought a Pong machine and brought home. That's what I have. That was my first experience. And then after that, I had all those little Mattel handheld LED games and all of those sorts of things. But everybody had heard of Pong. Pong made a big splash. People, probably stand-up comedians at the time joked about Pong, but it did not change the landscape of pop culture. There was just an awareness of it out there, and then 20 years later, something like Pac-Man came along and really changed things up. I guess Catan is our Pong, and we're about 20 years on from that. Maybe we're getting to that point, but here's the thing. There's a big, big difference, and the fundamental problem is when Pac-Man came along, it was universally appealing. Anybody could sit down and play it immediately. That is not the case for board games. Board games have a huge barrier to entry that are always going to prevent that kind of true breakthrough pop culture, change the landscape of human society forever, breakthrough the same way that Pac-Man did, or Space Invaders, or what have you. It's not until we crack that. So I guess that gets into your other question of where are video games going? The most important thing we can do as an industry is burn rule books. Get ourselves to the point where board games can provide the same meaningful, strategic, and tactical depth and camaraderie between players, and everything that's great. The social experience, everything you and I know and love about board games that our parents don't understand or our coworkers don't understand when they just dismiss it as, everything that we have to break through. Right now, the only way that board games have any chance of breaking through to a wider pop culture acceptance is us as ambassadors, because we'll do the work, we'll learn how to play the game, and then we'll teach you muggles out there. But then the muggles will still go home, try and buy a game, realize, I don't want to read 20 pages of rules. Maybe not. Maybe this isn't for me. As opposed to Pac-Man, which led to Miss Pac-Man, which led to Centipede, which cemented the notion of, I'll keep playing these things. Board games need to get over that hump. There's a few different ways. You asked what's coming. Freedom and Freeze is on the, it's a big deal. It's probably not going to get a lot of attention, but it is a big deal. The Freedom and Freeze is putting out at Essen this year a series of 3 games that, I don't know, I haven't played them yet, I don't remember their names, but they are attempting to teach you as you go. You start out, you just read this card, it tells you what to do, you read the next card, it tells you what to do. Before you go, you've got a game with the same depth of splendor, but you didn't have to read a 4-page rule book with a bunch of dry descriptions of how this game plays, which is going to turn off. I don't care how simple Splendor is. That book is still too... My mom is never going to read the rule book for Splendor. My brother is not going to bother reading that. He just doesn't care. It doesn't pull him in. It's a barrier to entry. Freedom and Freeze is trying to break that. There's a group of guys, software developers, making some software now called Dized, D-I-Z-E-D. It's an app for your smartphone, or I assume laptops or whatever, that does the same things. It turns any game into a potential... This game will teach you how to play it as you go. That's important. That's the key to true breakthrough. That's the key to us getting to where video games are. There's some early interesting steps that are coming. More will be coming. Legends of Andor was brilliant. I think it deserved its Kennerspiel des Jahres winner because it did the same thing. It tried to teach you the same way a video game tries to walk you through a tutorial of your game. It was an interesting experiment. I'm not saying it worked perfectly, but those kinds of steps are what more than legacy games, more than digital integration, more than minis or higher quality components, more than 3D printers at home. All those things pale in comparison to cracking the code of not sacrificing the depth of the gameplay, but eliminating the need for 10 to 20 page rulebooks. There you go. 7. Would you agree that Kickstarter has had a large influence on the board gaming world? Since you yourself got into board games, how has the community evolved in your opinion? Yes, Kickstarter is amazing. I love Kickstarter. It's so wonderful that there is a platform that allows anybody with a dream to make and publish a board game. There are enough how-tos out there so that pretty much anybody can figure it out, and really the onus is on you not to figure out how to get the thing printed and run the business, but just how to make the game, test it, and of course, because it's so democratizing that anybody can do it, probably 90% of the stuff on there is crap, so it's very caveat emptor, buyer beware. But for my money, it's immediately obvious when there's a game on Kickstarter that has a chance of being good versus one that's just a quick cash. Hey, I know how to make a game because I played another game. I'm just going to make a copy of Cards Against Humanity or something like that. So separating the wheat from the chaff, I don't understand. To me, it's pretty easy. Just read the rule book. If they don't give you the rule book, assume it's crap. Because if it wasn't, they'd give you the rule book so you could make a determination. If you're trying to judge it, read the rule book and just imagine what the game would be like to play. I know, maybe easier said than done. I can do it because I read 500 rule books a year. But at this point, it's what you need to do. But anyway, yeah, I think it's an amazing watershed tool, breakthrough tool that is so wonderful because it allows people to make games. Hey, it allows me to do Rahdo Runs Through. It allows Tom Vassell to do Dice Tower. It's a game changer in the same way that Uber is a game changer, or all these delivery service apps are game changers. I mean, it's cool and it's exciting and it's constantly changing, and I'm happy to be alive to watch it. 8. What is the most interesting trend in gaming you are seeing? You know what? I think I just discussed that at length earlier, and that's it, folks. Fetcha, thanks for watching. Have a very, very nice day. Talk to you later. So long.